You've moved from deciding when an agent is even necessary through decomposition, topologies, configuration, tool design, context management, and evaluation. Now you'll bring it all together by building the 4 systems the exam guide explicitly asks you to practice: a customer support agent under constraints, a multi-agent research system, a code review pipeline, and a batch processing workflow. Each one will test your ability to pick the right architecture, enforce rules at the right scope, and prove your system meets its acceptance criteria. Let's start with the first. By the end of this module, you have built the 4 systems the exam guide asks candidates to build, and can demonstrate each one's acceptance criteria. Here is how this module builds up. This is a hands-on build of an agentic loop with tool integration, structured error handling, and escalation. It is scenario 1 of the exam, constructed rather than described. The distinction that catches people: this is not a prompt engineering exercise. You are building the gates that always work, not the instructions that usually work. In production, an agent without these patterns fails silently. Weak tool descriptions cause misrouting, the agent picks the wrong tool and the user gets a plausible but incorrect answer. Without a programmatic hook, a blocked operation just dead ends, the user sees an error with no path forward. And without structured error responses, the agent cannot decide whether to retry or explain, it either loops forever or gives up too soon. The cost is trust: users learn the agent is unreliable, and every failure mode becomes a support ticket. Take the threshold hook. You intercept a tool call, say, a purchase above $10,000, before it executes. The hook returns a structured error: error category permission is retriable false, with a human-readable description. The agent reads that error and, because the category is permission and not transient, it does not retry. Instead, it escalates, redirecting to a human review workflow. The alternative is a prompt rule: do not process purchases above $10,000. That is probabilistic. The model might comply most of the time, but under pressure or with a clever user, it can be talked around. The hook cannot. The other cases, transient errors producing retries, business errors producing explanations, follow the same pattern, and they are on the page. The durable rule: gates go in code, not prompts. A programmatic hook that blocks above a threshold is deterministic, a prompt instruction is not. Rejecting a routing classifier is not about the classifier, it is about bypassing the language understanding you are paying for. Structured errors are machine-readable decisions: the agent retries or explains based on data you returned, not prose you wrote. And test the failure modes, not the happy path. Every acceptance criterion here is a failure mode because that is what the exam items are written from. On the exam, this is tested with scenario questions that present a failure: an agent misroutes, a blocked operation dead ends, and error loops. You must identify whether the fix belongs in the prompt or in the code. The classic distractor is a better prompt: the item offers a more detailed instruction when what is actually needed is a programmatic gate. Escalation versus dead end is another common trap: the item tests whether the agent redirects to a human review or simply stops. This part is testcraft, and knowing the distinction is half the marks. This is configuration as a set of precedents and activation rules, not a pile of text files. The distinction: a Claude.md in the wrong directory looks correct but never loads for teammates. Path rules use glob matching, they are not inferred from context. A forked skill runs in an isolated context, its output does not leak. MCP servers combine scopes, but credentials must never be committed. Get the activation model wrong, and your config is silently absent. Without verification, you ship dead configuration. A path rule you believe is active never fires because the glob is wrong or the file is in the wrong directory. A teammate clones the repo and your coding standards are missing, the AI behaves differently for them. Credentials committed to .mcp.json become a security incident. The cost is inconsistency, broken workflows, and leaked secrets. This exercise forces you to prove activation, not assume it. Take the path rule case. You create a rule in .claude/rules/ with YAML front matter specifying paths, src/api/***. The rule contains API design standards. You open src/api/users.ts and run /memory, the rule is listed. Then you open readme.md at the repo root and run /memory again. The rule is absent. The alternative, assuming the rule loads because the file exists, loses because activation is by glob match, not directory proximity. The other cases, project Claude.md scope, fork skill isolation, MCP scopes, follow the same verify don't assume pattern and are detailed in the exercise. The durable rule, configuration is verified by activation, not by file existence. After every change, run /memory and check exactly what loads. Prove absence by opening a file that should not trigger the rule. For MCP, never put a secret in a committed file, use environment variable expansion and keep personal servers in /.claude.json. Rejecting a routing classifier is not about trivia, it is because bypassing the language understanding you are paying for breaks the activation model. This rule holds whether you are on Claude Code today or any tool that matches config by scope and path. This is Testcraft. The exam will offer options that look correct if you think configuration is about file presence. The distractor is any answer that would work if activation were inferred rather than matched, for example, a rule that should apply because it is in the right directory, but the glob is wrong. Scope errors are common. A Claude.md in your home directory does not help a teammate. The acceptance criteria in this exercise are exactly the evidence the exam scenarios will ask you to evaluate. Structured extraction is the process of pulling predefined fields from unstructured text. But the real distinction is between syntax and semantics. A strict JSON schema eliminates malformed JSON, that is syntax. It does nothing about a line item that fails to sum, that is semantics. The boundary people get wrong is thinking that validation equals correctness. It does not. A valid JSON object can still contain a lie. Without nullable fields, the model will invent a value when information is missing. That fabricated value enters your database, your reports, your decisions. It is worse than a null because it looks correct. A null, on the other hand, can trigger a review step or a follow-up query. In production, a pipeline that silently fills gaps with plausible lies erodes trust and causes errors that are nearly impossible to trace. The cost is not just one wrong field, it is the entire downstream system acting on false information. Take a document missing a required date. The extraction returns a JSON object without that field. Your pedantic model raises a validation error. You send a follow-up message containing the original document, the failed extraction, and the specific error field required. The model might still fail because the date is not in the document. You record that in the unfixable column. If the error was a malformed date string, the retry would fix it. The alternative, asking the model to try harder without the error detail, loses because it wastes tokens and often produces another invalid attempt. The other cases, like inline citations versus bibliographies, follow the same pattern. You measure the change in empty required fields after adding few-shot examples. The durable rule is, schema enforcement prevents syntax errors, not semantic ones. You must design schemas that let the model say I don't know through nulls. When you reject an option like marking every field required, you do it because a fabricated value that validates is worse than a null. This holds true in any system you build next year, regardless of the model or framework. The second rule is to analyze accuracy by segment. A 95% headline accuracy means nothing if one document type is at 60%. That segment is where your pipeline fails in production. The exam tests this by asking why schema enforcement did not prevent your semantic errors. The distractor is thinking that strict validation solves everything. You will see scenarios where a pipeline produces valid JSON with incorrect totals, and you must identify that the schema only checked format, not meaning. Another common trap is marking all fields required to avoid nulls. The exam will present a case where that leads to fabricated data, and you must recognize it as worse than a missing value. A multi-agent research pipeline is a coordinator that farms out work to specialized subagents, here, web search and document analysis, and then synthesizes their structured output into a report with provenance. It is not a single agent with a long prompt, and it is not a chain where each step depends on the last. The distinction people get wrong is thinking subagents share context automatically. They do not, and that assumption breaks attribution. Without explicit context passing in structured output, A multi-agent pipeline fails in production by producing reports that look correct but cannot be audited. A claim appears without a source, or two conflicting statistics get averaged into a single misleading number. The cost is trust. When a stakeholder asks where a figure came from, you cannot point at the field that carried it. Building this pipeline yourself is how you learn that the failure usually starts in the coordinator's decomposition, not in the synthesizer that gets blamed. Take the error propagation case. You simulate a timeout on the web search subagent. The coordinator must receive not just a failure flag, but the failure type, timeout, the query that was attempted, and any partial results the subagent managed to return before it died. The alternative is to let the whole pipeline crash or to silently drop that subagent's contribution. That loses the partial work and leaves the report with an unexplained hole. Instead, the coordinator proceeds with what it has and annotates the coverage gap, web search timed out, findings from document analysis only. The other cases, parallel execution, structured output, conflicting sources, follow the same pattern of explicit handling, and they are detailed in the exercise. The durable rule is that multi-agent systems require explicit context, structured output, and error propagation that preserves partial work. When the author rejects relying on inheritance, the reason is that it bypasses the control you need for auditability. Every claim must trace to a source, and you cannot do that if you do not know what each subagent received. This holds whether you are building for an exam or for a production system next year. In the exam, this material appears in scenario-based questions that test judgment, not recall. The distractor that catches people is treating the exercise as a reading task, reasoning about what would happen instead of building it and writing down the numbers. The exam expects you to have seen the behavior change when you remove the task tool, to have measured the latency difference, and to know where attribution breaks when context is not explicit. That is testcraft, and it is why the exercise exists. In this module, you learned that acceptance criteria often hide in failure modes, so test those first. When sharing Claude code rules, always verify them in a clean clone. Assumptions break in team workflows. For extraction pipelines, optional fields prevent the model from inventing data that sneaks past validation. And in multi-agent systems, hard numbers on latency and coverage beat gut feelings every time. Now go apply these to your own exam prep.